Hello, everybody, and welcome to News Talk 850 WFTL. My name is Steve Warnicki. You are listening to a four-part series on policing in America. This is the fourth and final week. If you missed the episodes, they're at stevewarnicki.com. The first episode was called The Broad Brush. We talked about the global perspective of the George Floyd case. In episode 2, we talked about the face of America's police, just who are America's cops. In episode 3, we went through the system of policing, the existing laws, use of force, existing oversight. It's very interesting. If you missed it, check it out. Today, probably our crown jewel presentation is part 4. And today we're going to give you a different perspective than you've probably ever heard before. And that is the police officer's perspective from behind the badge. Today we want to talk about PTSD, cumulative trauma, or what I'm calling law enforcement distress syndrome, and how the job of police officer is creating a divide in America. In today's episode, we're going to talk to you about PTSD, cumulative trauma. What does seeing death, destruction, and all of this do to a person over a period of days, weeks, months, and years? You're going to hear testimonials from people that have contacted us. You're also going to hear the results of a research study that I conducted that involved over 1,000 police officers and their experience with law enforcement distress syndrome. So for those of you who don't know me, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Steve Warnicki. I'm a retired Denver police sergeant with 15 years of law enforcement experience. I'm an Emmy-winning producer and award-winning author. I'm a researcher, keynote speaker, and media expert when it comes to police matters. It has been my mission since I left the police department some 5 years ago to improve the quality of life for America's police, to reduce and eliminate police suicides, and also to bridge the gap between law enforcement and American citizens. And after what's happened recently and what's continuing to happen here in America, there could not be a better time for this connection to happen. Some of the things I've done since I've left the job, I talk about healing the relationship between police and citizens. I wrote a book. It's called From Boy to Blue. It's a memoir about my time on the job. It's not just war stories. It's an explanation, what police are thinking, who the police are, what they're doing, why they're doing it, what they're allowed to do, the types of people that become police officers. At stevewarnicki.com, you can find lots and lots of articles. There's articles for citizens about the police. There's articles for the police about their own health and wellness. And there's other podcasts. Some of the times I dissect media stories. Some of the times I dissect major incidents, and other times I'm just out trying to bridge this gap between law enforcement and citizens. So with that, let's begin episode 4 of Policing in America, PTSD, cumulative trauma, and what I'm calling law enforcement distress syndrome, how the job of police officer is creating a divide in America. The media's talked about cumulative trauma a lot. We've started to hear that. We've heard it in the Washington Post. We've heard it everywhere. Everybody's like the cumulative trauma because there's this recognition in America that there's more happening to today's law enforcement than just PTSD. Certainly, PTSD is an issue. But I think it's important to name what we're talking about. Let me give you a quote from David Slauson, who's an anthropologist. David says, names are an important key to what a society values. Anthropologists recognize naming as one of the chief methods for imposing order on perception. So we can talk about this idea of cumulative trauma, but let's give it a name. So I want to make a point real quick. Pretend we're all back in the caveman era, okay? We're out, we're hunting, we're gathering, we're collecting berries, we're shooting things and cooking them over the campfires. And one day, dark clouds start to come. And we're used to dark clouds. We've had thunderstorms. Some are worse than others. There's lightning, there's thunder, there's sometimes hail, there's wind, that kind of thing, right? But this one starts to come, and it's really, really strong. And there are 200 plus mile an hour winds, rain, hail, tornadoes, lightning. Everybody's in danger. We don't know what it is. We've never seen this before. And it goes for a few hours, and then all of a sudden it's peaceful and beautiful, perfectly clear out. You look up, you can see the blue sky, and then all of a sudden it comes back. Hours again, hours. Everything's ruined, flooded, destroyed. Well, you and I both know we're talking about a hurricane here. But if you don't know what it is, you could go, well, that was some storm, right? What the heck was that? What the heck was that thing, And so over time, scientists named it. They said, oh, this is a hurricane. And naming it allows us to do certain things. It allows us to study it, to talk about it, to measure it, to understand it, to combat it. I live in South Florida, and if you look around now, there's protocols in place, right? When a hurricane comes, we've established protocols. What to do, what steps to take, what's the mitigation for a hurricane. We have built our buildings out of CBS blocks, cement construction. You go anywhere else. I'm from Denver originally. Houses are built out of 2x4s and plywood, right? Not where there's hurricanes. Why? Because we're trying to minimize the effect of hurricanes. Because we know we need that strong foundation in order to withstand those storms. We invented things like radar so that we could predict. We did studies, right? Now we have weather people. Granted, it's not always that accurate. It's going to hit here. It's going to hit here. Change direction. We don't know anything. They don't know anything. But they're trying. They're trying. And we might someday. They're getting better at it, Okay, so they're getting better at it. But we have radar. We're measuring it. We send planes into it. And they drop things and try to measure. We categorized it, right? We put it into categories. We organized it. There's category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is the big one. We're all dead, right? Why are we doing all this? So we can understand it, so we can combat it. All this originated with a name, because had we not named it, we wouldn't know what we're talking about. We wouldn't all be able to talk about it. So when we're talking about cumulative trauma for law enforcement, we need to give it a name so we can do the same thing. So we can come up with ways, radar, so to speak, so we can predict it. So we can build our foundations deep in police officers when they go to the academy so they can withstand the storms of cumulative trauma. If we name law enforcement distress syndrome, we can make categories 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Severity, we know severity. We know what to look for. We're going to study it, right? We develop protocols. When this happens, we're going to do this. Turn all the highways north, get everybody out of Florida, right? So the analogy is a good one because the storm of cumulative trauma that hits police officers is very much like a hurricane. It's slow moving. You don't know what's coming. It comes on and it's stronger than you thought. You think, oh, there's a thunderstorm. No, it's a hurricane, right? That's why we named it law enforcement distress syndrome. So what is law enforcement distress syndrome? Law enforcement distress syndrome is a psychological condition developed by some police officers due to prolonged exposure to continuous threat, to violence, to trauma, to crime, to accidents. What do you do when everybody you talk to has been victimized, hurt, shot, stabbed, robbed, raped, burned, impersonated, injured, maimed? What effect does that have on you when you do it? 8, 10 hours a day, 40 hours a week for weeks and months and years on end. That's what we sought to discover in our research study. PTSD is certainly something law enforcement has to contend with. And I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, but we know post-traumatic stress disorder happens when people are involved in a single traumatic event. You can have an incident where you're in a shooting or you witness something horrific. And this can happen. This doesn't happen to police officers. I mean, imagine the people that were in the plane that landed on the Hudson. Some of them probably have PTSD, right? When your plane sits down in the Hudson. PTSD can happen to anybody, but it's a single traumatic event. Now, unfortunately for police officers, they might experience multiple events of PTSD because some of them might be in a shooting and then may witness another horrific ordeal. And so they may be affected by PTSD for sure. And I like to compare PTSD to a tornado, right? It's very localized to a particular area. So if PTSD is the tornado, law enforcement distress syndrome is the slow-moving hurricane. I think PTSD comes on quick. You're out doing your job. Somebody starts shooting you. You're shot. You're shooting a bam! It's fast. It's like a tornado. Sirens go off and it's there. But the hurricane's like, it's coming. It's going to be there Friday, maybe Saturday. Okay, now it's Sunday. But it's ominous. It's slow-moving. Hurricanes move at just a few miles an hour. And nobody really knows how bad they're going to be until they're in the middle of it, right? So law enforcement distress syndrome is the hurricane. PTSD is the tornado. Law enforcement distress syndrome isn't PTSD for multiple incidents. It's just this continuous exposure to victimization, crime, violence, all of that. All right, you're listening to the Steve Warnicki Show on 850 WFTL. This is an ongoing 4-part series on policing in America. This is episode number 4, PTSD, Cumulative Trauma, and what I'm calling Law Enforcement Distress Syndrome. If you missed any of the episodes, you want to know more about me, my podcast, my book, my writings, please head to www.stevewarnicki.com. That's stevewarnicki.com. Let me talk to you about how I came to write about law enforcement distress syndrome, okay? I'm a policeman 15 years. My father dies, and I had this moment where I was like, okay, I've always wanted to live in Florida. I've always wanted to do some other things. So it's now or never, right? And sometimes it takes a big event like that to, have the stones to leave. You know what I mean? Because police departments, you get 2 months off a year. It's the greatest job ever, right? And it was all I'd ever wanted to do since I was a kid. But I took the opportunity. I retired honorably from the police department. I moved to Florida. And imagine, you're a cop for 15 years and all your friends are cops and everything you talk about is police work, just like anybody at any job. You know what I mean? And then I moved to Florida and all of a sudden I don't know any more police and I'm meeting people that aren't police and I'm away from the job of police officer. And after some time, and I like to joke, I was in counseling too. I always have been. My mom put me in there when I was 5. She's like, we're getting a divorce, honey. You're going to counseling. And I'm like, but you're getting the divorce. You go to counseling. Anyway, I actually ended up liking it. I think counseling is such an important thing. And I just go and I've been there. So I start to notice that these things have happened. And I'm like, where did this occur? How is this happening to me all of a sudden? I'm going to talk about what was happening. The changes that I believe happen to a person who's experiencing law enforcement distress syndrome happen slowly over time. And so starting to have some distance and some clarity and actually starting to improve and move my way back to a place where I wasn't experiencing the symptoms of law enforcement distress syndrome. Then all of a sudden I go home, go back to Denver, visit people. My friends come and stay here and we're hanging out or we're doing things. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's that thing I was doing. Oh, yeah. I recognize myself. I'm like, oh, that's the thing I'm struggling with. And so law enforcement distress syndrome, I'm like, oh my God, this is the thing, right? So I wrote about it. I published a paper about it. And then I was like, I need to know how prevalent this is. So I set out to do this research study that involved over 1,000 cops. I'm going to tell you about it. So I identified 8 symptoms of law enforcement distress syndrome that I experienced personally or saw somebody that did. Okay? So that's where it came about. The first one, hyper-vigilance. What's hyper-vigilance? Overreacting to basic situations, right? Hyper-vigilance is when an officer is constantly and continually evaluating their surroundings, both on and off duty, to the point where relaxation becomes impossible or difficult, at least. It's a tricky situation because police officers have to be vigilant. People are trying to hurt the police, especially now. Vigilance will keep you alive as a police officer, and they teach you in the academy to be vigilant. And they remind you along the way to be vigilant, because when you're too complacent and you forget officer safety, you can get hurt. So vigilance is a good thing. Hypervigilance is a bad thing. It's a tricky line to walk, right? It really is. How much is too much? And so if you're in law enforcement, when I give this talk to police departments, I tell the cops, I say, hey, just listen to these things. You might not have an answer right now, but just begin to think about them. Where are you on this spectrum? Because sometimes it's hard to know. It's come on slowly. You've changed over time. And then you go back out in the world. Now you have this knowledge. We've named it. We've identified it. We've classified it. We've talked about the different things. You go, oh, that's that thing he was talking about. So just if you're in law enforcement, where are you on this deal? If you're not in law enforcement, this is what's happening to a lot of people in law enforcement. And, so at what point does vigilance become hypervigilance? Cops are taught, sit with your back to a wall at a restaurant, right? You never go to a restaurant without sitting your back at a wall. You don't want to sit with your back to the door. Somebody could come in with a gun and shoot you. It's happened. Cops have been sitting down eating and been killed. Or somebody comes in to rob the joint. If you're the one with the gun and you're supposed to be protecting everybody, you sit with your back to the wall. I think that's reasonable and prudent, right? That's vigilance. They teach you how to stand when you approach somebody. Gun side away. Those are reasonable, vigilant things you can do. When does vigilance become hypervigilance? Well, I believe when the quality of your life starts to go down and you are constantly evaluating both on and off duty, everything, and you can't relax. You're going to hear from some cops that can't relax even in their own home. That's a problem. The human body wasn't meant to go, 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 go. We have to recover. You can't have cortisol in your system all the time. You can't be stressed all the time. You have to have a place where you can relax and recover. And if you're constantly evaluating everything and constantly on guard, what does that do to a person physiologically and mentally? So we look at the results, some of the results from our research study. 65% of police officers feel like they're constantly searching for threats. 65, that's a huge number. Constantly. 51% believe if they're not paying attention, they'll be victimized. Is that true? Maybe, right? 57% of the cops are more anxious about travel now than before they became the cops. That was me. I was terrified to travel. Why? I'm in a foreign country. I'm in another place. I don't have my gun with me. I'm like, everybody that I've responded to as a police officer that was visiting got their wallets ripped off. They got beaten up. They got mugged. They got whatever, right? It's going to happen to me. So I can't relax on vacation. Like, where's the safe in the hotel room, right? Putting money. Let's pull up the corner of the carpet. We'll hide some money under here because they break into the safe or what, I don't want to get too drunk. I'm standing with my back to the wall at the bar in Ireland. Oh, hey, mate. Yeah. Can you have a good time on vacation? Can you relax? Now, you may pick one of these individual things, go, that doesn't mean anything. I want you to think about this in a totality of the circumstances, right? Look at everything, hear it all together and go, yeah, that's where they're at, the cops. A lot of them. 25% of police officers believe the danger of them being victimized by a crime at home is high. Now, that's not 65, 57, 51, but 25, a quarter of the cops. That's what I'm talking about. A quarter of the cops. Can you relax at home? Can you rejuvenate? Or are you on guard at home? Only 9% of the cops say they can relax easily in public. 16% say they can be relaxed at work. That's probably a good thing. I mean, while you're at work and you're a police officer, you have a target on your back. You're wearing the uniform, you're in a police car. You probably can't be. I was never that relaxed at work. Unless you're in the station or somewhere where you feel safe. But yeah, that's a thing. But then can you recover when you go home? So that's hypervigilance. All right, if you're just joining us, you're listening to News Talk 850 WFTL. This is the Steve Warnicki Show, and this is a ongoing 4-part series on policing in America. You're listening to episode 4, PTSD, Cumulative Trauma, and what I'm calling law enforcement distress syndrome, how the job of police officer creates a divide. There's so much more from me at stevewarnicki.com. That's WARNEKE.com. Please go there, pass it along to police and non-police, because what we're doing is very important. The second symptom I want to identify is revenge, vengeance, paranoia. So, all right, a lot of you may hear this and go, he thinks aliens have invaded. No, it's not an alien invasion thing. You're not scared like, that the government's tapping your phone lines. It's not like, you should be in the psych ward potentially paranoia. It's your fear of retaliation. Revenge paranoia comes from this belief that many of your actions will be answered with retaliation and revenge. Had a Denver cop throw a guy out of a party. They were working the door, off duty. A few hours later, this guy comes back, shoots him from behind and kills him, shoots another officer, wounds him from behind. That's that worry about retaliation. So this also applies to complaints. You're worried if you go out and you do your job. Listen, good cops get complained on. They do. If you're out doing your job, you're out stopping people that are doing bad things, making contact, searching people, arresting people, you're going to get complained on, and occasionally you're going to get into a use of force. It's going to happen. How many times did I hear this happen to me? Not once, a lot. Driving somebody to jail and they say, when I get out of here, I'm going to come find you and kill you. Or, when I get out of here, I'm going to look up your family and I'm going to go kill them. That happens. You're worried about it. How much are you worried about it? Where are you on the scale? I had a police friend of mine who'd been on the job 20 more years than me. He's retired now. Was my mentor on the job. Amazing man. And he exemplified every one of these symptoms to an extreme. Everyone but one, that is, he exemplified. But we'll talk about that at the end. But I went to see him toward the end of his career. Lives in a nice neighborhood, all right? And he moved in and he put bars, security gates, and alarm systems, and just so much stuff on his house. And because he was having trouble relaxing at home, because he'd been a cop for 30-something years, and he'd thrown thousands of people in jail. And I went to visit him. We were visiting for a while, and he went to walk me to the car. And it was a row of townhomes. We walk out of the front door. You can see my car. It's literally right behind me. Maybe 30 feet across a little alleyway into a parking space in there, and I'm to the car. He's going to walk me to my car. He'll see me off. All right. Probably because he thinks something's going to happen to me, right? So he's bolting all of the deadbolts, setting the alarm. And I said, what are you doing? And he goes, well, I don't want someone to sneak in behind me while I'm walking to your car. And he's 100% serious. That he's gotten to a point where that's how he's living. That he can't walk 30 feet away from his front door without thinking that somebody snuck in to do something bad. Or maybe to get him back. Right? Hyper-vigilance. Revenge or vengeance paranoia. One or both of those. It's an extreme case, but it happens. Let's look at our research study. 67% of officers are scared to post about themselves on social media or their family. Well, big deal. No, that's the thing everybody takes for granted, right? They're like, no, I'm having croissants. I'm leaving for a 4-week cruise. Cops don't want to do that. They're like, oh, people can find out where I live. They're going to break into my house. I don't want to put my family at risk. People might know I'm a police officer. I don't want people to know where I am. 67%. 45% of the cops believe their home is a target for crime because they are the cops. Because I came out one day, my home in Denver, my mailbox was smashed in. Like somebody drove by with a bat and played mailbox baseball. Great, but mine was the only one done. Now, was it coincidence? I don't know. We never figured it out. But my first thought was, it's because I'm the cops. People know. Came by and smashed. And now I'm nervous at home because you've been victimized. Now, it's just a mailbox smash, but it makes you uneasy. Somebody's willing to come by and identify your house and smash your mailbox, right? 68% of the cops are anxious following a use of force event, even if they feel their actions were justified. It's because they're worried people are going to complain on them, especially in today's day and age, where we're now seeing police officers using force that was justified just being fired for it. I'll bet this number is way higher. We weren't doing this survey in 2020. 45% of the cops have been the target of revenge or retaliation for on-duty justified actions. So it's not just an irrational fear about being retaliated against. It's happened, so it's legitimate, so there's some basis to it. But how far has this permeated its way into your life if you're the cops? You got to take some inventory. I was probably like middle of the road. I was pretty worried that people were going to try to get me back. 76% of the cops believe people would not be scared to seek revenge against the cops simply because they are the cops. Isn't that an astonishing number? When I was a kid, if you saw the cops, you'd be like, don't mess with him. Or if you knew your neighbor was a cop, can you imagine messing with his house? You'd be like, don't mess with his house, dude. He's a cop. He'll kill us, like come out and baton us to death. Now, that's not a thing anymore. People don't care about that. In fact, the cops know they don't care about it. Like, they don't care I'm the police. In fact, they're more likely to do it because I am. 64% of cops don't want their neighbors to know they're cops. Why? For reasons like the mailbox. What if everybody's out hating the police and all your neighbors know you're the cops and now they don't like you either? You don't need that trouble at home, right? There's another reason you don't want your neighbors to know you're the cops. I had a lady ring my doorbell. I never met her. She lives around the corner. I never even seen her. She says, because the neighbors talk. Somebody sees you in uniform. Listen, it's like being gay. Everybody's going to know about it. It's hot gossip, okay? They're going to be like, that guy's a cop. Hey, just go, I think they just go carol to each other and sing. So he's a cop up there. So they know, they talk. I'm telling you. So this lady brings her daughter to the house, rings the doorbell. I'd never seen her before. Hello? What are you doing? Well, hi, my name's Linda. I live around the block, and we heard you were a police officer, so the daughter's like 8. She said, I brought my daughter here, so as I taught her, this is where to come when there's an emergency. No, that's terrible. That's a terrible idea. Like, don't teach her to come here. What if I'm not home? Right? What if I'm asleep? Like, you got to teach her to call 911. Don't teach her to come to me. I mean, I'm happy to help if she needed. I'm happy to help her, but that's a terrible idea. I was working 12, 14 hours a day back then. The chances of catching me at home were pretty low. So here's the third symptom: distrust of others and their motivations. Compounding this symptom, the distrust of others and their motivations, is this belief that everybody's motivated by evil, nefarious, selfish, criminal motivations, and that's behind their every action. It leads cops to distrust sometimes even their friends and loved ones. The cop that I was telling you about got along with his brother, but really didn't talk to his family much. When I met him, he had 3 friends, and I was one of them. 3. That's all he talked to. That's all he would do anything with. 10 years later, he was down to 1. And now I don't really even talk to him either. But I moved to Florida. So I don't know. Like, what I'm saying is, like, this, if you're an officer, this can permeate its way into your personal life. It can create a divide between you and loved ones. The officers feel like they have this overwhelming need for proof. If you're a police officer, have you done this? Has a loved one, a spouse, somebody really important that you've always trusted tell you something, and you're like, I better corroborate this. Well, maybe you don't go through your phone or anything, but you feel like you need this overwhelming need for proof. Has this happened to you? How far are you taking it? Is it in your personal life? Let's look at the research study that we did. 56% of the officers do not believe what people tell them. Listen, at work, that's a great thing. That's a great thing, okay? I had a guy once, pulled him over, didn't have his ID, he was from out of state. In those days, you basically had to tie a piece of paper to a pigeon and make it fly away to bringing back the results. It took forever. These were the first car computers that were so slow, and it just wasn't coming back. That happens. I couldn't find it. I believed the guy. And another officer came to cover me on this traffic stop. And, I did the normal police thing. I asked him 52 to 100 times what his name and date of birth was, different ways. He answered it. Like, it was just rattled it off. Perfect. Got it. I got it. No problem. And I believed him. And, here's some police courtesy for you. If you pull up on a policeman's traffic stop, you don't generally take take over. You're there. It's his or her stop, and you let them do it. You're just there to make sure they don't get hurt. And what was really unusual is the cop that covered me said to me, hey, if you're just going to let him go, would you be offended if I took him down to headquarters and just had him fingerprinted just to see who he is? Well, you could do that in those days, right? You could take them down. They're not under arrest, but you don't know who they are. They don't have ID. They're driving a vehicle. You could take them down, get them fingerprinted, figure out who they are. Yeah, go ahead. So he tells the guy he's going to do this. The guy says, all right, I'll tell you my real name. Wanted for armed robbery out of New Mexico. I mean, inches away from his freedom. Cops get lied to nonstop, right? When that happens to you as the police, you are less and less likely to trust people because you don't want to feel like that again. You want overwhelming proof, right? 41% of police officers believe their significant other lies to them. I don't know if that's a testimony as to who police officers are dating or if that means that this distrust of others is permeating its way into their private lives. 43% of officers say they trust no one. No one. 43%. Has it gotten to a point for 43% of cops they don't trust anybody? Anybody. I use the words no one in that question. 43% of people agreed with that. 69% of police officers don't believe people are generally telling the truth when answering their questions. They're not when you're on duty. What happens? You start to believe nobody is. Let's talk about the next symptom, antisocial behavior. Now, what I also want to take a moment before we define antisocial behavior, and I want you to start adding all of this up. You're hyper-vigilant, right? You're always on guard. You can't relax at home. You feel like you need to always be alert or you're going to be victimized, period. Now you have this revenge and vengeance paranoia on top of that. Like you're worried about the things you do that are justified even because people are going to get me back. And now you've got this distrust of others because they're lying to you all the time. Or you've been duped. And now you're going to add on antisocial behavior. Officers suffering from antisocial behavior tend to avoid anyone not within their inner circle. You see a lot of cops that start to avoid large crowds. They don't want to go to events whenever possible to stay away from it. In some extreme cases, officers begin to disassociate with friends and family, in the example that I gave you of my dear friend. And I think they do that in order to avoid hurt or betrayal. And there's some other factors we're going to talk about that are driving police into antisocial behavior. So now you're starting to add all these together. What does that do to a person's quality of life? So let's talk about not just seeing all the victimization, crime, gore, guts, accidents, day in and day out, week after week, hour after hour, month after month. But now let's look at some other influences. 88% of cops believe the media is against the police. And whether or not that's true, that's their perception. I mean, it probably is, right? But that's the perception. This was taken before the George Floyd thing. It was probably like 98% right now, right? All right. So I don't know what the number is, but so the media is against you. 93% of police officers believe that Americans do not understand the job of cops. I believe that's also true, but 93% are going, you don't understand this job. You're not understanding what's going on out here. 62% of police officers don't believe people respect the police. There's not a lot of respect going on for the cops right now. So people don't like you and they don't respect you. 55% of the cops find it hard to make new friends since they became cops. Of course, nobody likes you. Everybody's against you. That's the perception. That's the feeling. 58% of the cops we surveyed say most of their other friends are cops. 50% of the police officers we surveyed don't believe that the department stands up for them. even if they've done the right thing. So on top of people don't understand me, so I want to just hang out with other cops because they understand the job. The media is against me. The public doesn't understand me. The public doesn't respect me. The department doesn't stand up for me if I've done the right thing. And you're hanging out with other cops, which are all experiencing the same things, which drives you into an antisocial scenario. This is a recipe for disaster. Can you see this? Can you see what's happening? It's no wonder police suicides, which we'll talk in about a minute, are skyrocketing. All right, if you're just joining us, this is News Talk 850 WFTL. My name is Steve Warnicki. You're listening to a 4-part series on policing in America. This is episode 4, PTSD, Cumulative Trauma, and what I'm calling Law Enforcement Distress Syndrome, how the job of policing is creating a divide. If you want to hear more from me, including any of our last episodes, any of my podcast writings, or my book, From Boy to Blue, head to stevewarnicki.com. That's WARNEKE.com. Let's talk about the next symptom of law enforcement distress syndrome, one that I identified in therapy that I was really suffering from. And I call it, doesn't have a quick name, by the way, chronic fear caused by fatalistic thinking. Well, what does that mean? Everything you do can result in death. That's what it means. Police officers respond every day, day in and day out, to situations where everyday mundane activities have ended badly, have ended in an accident or negligence, has hurt somebody, criminal behavior has resulted in injury or death. Over time, I believe cops believe the probability of this happening to them is greater than it actually is. I'll give you a great example. I moved to Florida, and I'm from Colorado, so we don't really have boats. We have little ponds that people have boats on, but I don't know why you'd have a boat there. But so I wanted to get into boating, so I have this opportunity to take this 21-foot boat out onto the ocean by myself. It's a pretty calm day. I kind of had been learning how to drive a boat. I knew how to do it, so I'm out on the ocean. I'm terrified. I mean, you guys, I'm terrified, all right? Really. I'm thinking to myself, what could go wrong here? And I'm like, okay, well, I could hit a rogue wave and go overboard. So I take the little telephone cord that comes out of the key and I actually clip it to myself like you would on a jet ski, but I'm in a boat just in case. You know what I mean? I gotta pull it out. If I fall overboard, the engine dies. I can swim back to the boat. It won't just drive itself to the Bahamas, and I won't just be out here like that one movie where the husband and wife are just waiting to be rescued and they just give up and sink and the shark eats them, right? So, and it's spoiler alert. I don't know the name of the movie. It was terrible. So I'm out on the ocean. Then I'm thinking, okay, well, I saw this YouTube video once and people were going along on the waves, and all of a sudden this rogue wave hit and they hit their head on the side of the thing and they didn't go overboard, but they were passed out. So I put on a life vest just in case I passed out and the boat wrecked. And I didn't want to just put on a regular life vest. I put on the one that, like, when it hits the water, like the plane expands. And then I thought, well, that's not enough, because what if the CO2 cartridge isn't working? So I got the thing you throw overboard, like Gilligan's Island, right? The little circle. And then I better put my foot through it just in case this life vest doesn't work. And I'm like driving down the ocean like this, pretty sure that at any moment I'm about to die. And I tell my therapist this, and she says, what did you think was going to happen? And she goes, you think you were going to die? And I go, yes, I did. That's exactly what I thought. I was going to die. You think, I'm going to light the 4th of July fireworks with my family. Hey, I went to a 4th of July call one time. And, if they're calling us, it didn't go well, right? 2 guys lighting fireworks. They live across the street from each other. They both have their families with them. They get into an argument. They start talking smack to each other. Then they both think, I'm going to go get my gun. Screw this guy. Go back in the house, get their gun, put it in their back, behind their back and their waistband. Now they come out. Now you're going to talk more smack because you're emboldened. Now I'm going to really beat your butt, right? And then it escalates. And just like something out of a Tombstone movie, these 2 pull out their guns and shoot each other. The one guy's killed in front of his family. The other guy gets shot in the testicles. And he's sitting on the curb, and they're swollen, and they're really big. I'm not trying to be gross. I'm just saying, like, that's what happened. You see stuff like that. Or I saw a guy using a chop saw one time. They said, go to this warehouse. There's been an accident. Went there. The guy was using a chop saw. Piece of wood hit him in the eye. It's a big, like 8-inch piece of wood just sticking out of his eyeball. And he's running around like, so I've never used a chop saw ever again, or a drill, or any sort of power tool without eye protection, because I'm like, oh, I remember that guy. What's happened to you if you're the cops? Do you remember what's happened to you? Because those things take a toll. People are just out going to Starbucks and somebody drives up on the curb and hits them and kills them or whatever. It's just over and over. That's who you're seeing. That's who you're responding to. So you go light fire. People are like, let's go light fireworks. I'm like, I don't want to get in a thing with my neighbors. Yeah, it's unlikely, but that's what you remember, right? So over time, you start to think, well, everything could result in death. And your quality of life suffers because you're not doing stuff you want to. Our survey showed 68% of officers are more anxious since becoming a police officer. 68% of cops are more anxious since they became police. Wow. That's a huge number. 47% of officers are fanatics about safety precautions. The eyeglasses, the safety glasses. 62% of police officers believe people die all the time doing regular activities, and they do. It's not a large percentage. I mean, out of the whatever, I don't know how many people it is, but how many millions of people use some sort of power tool a day that it just goes fine, but the ones that the cops went to didn't go fine, right? 68% of the cops we surveyed have seen mundane activities result in someone's death. What does that do to you? I'm telling you what it does to people. This is it. You're worried about it all the time. You can't travel. Fear of travel. You're worried. Why? Because you're worried something bad's going to happen to you. What does that do to the quality of life of America's law enforcement? That's not good, right? Stop doing things you want. All right, let's talk about the next symptom is adrenaline addiction. This is an interesting one. I didn't know this one was a thing either. But, you turn your lights and sirens on and you're going to a double shooting or you get somewhere, that's an adrenaline rush. And when you do that day in and day out, your threshold of normalcy becomes these great highs and lows. Someone once told me, police work's 98% boredom, 2% sheer terror. It's true. Driving around, 2 a.m, sound asleep. Oh my God, how am I going to make it through tonight? All of a sudden, your coworkers are calling, screaming into the radio. They've been shot. They've shot somebody. There's shots fired. And you're going 100 miles an hour down the highway trying to get to them. Officers are frequently exposed to high adrenaline situations. And these highs become normal for people experiencing them on a routine basis. Much more so than the average civilian. If you're just doing your normal day, think about a normal person, right? Like, you may get in an accident. That makes your adrenaline go. Something, you may get robbed. Something bad may happen that causes a really intense adrenaline rush. But for the most part, it's not very often. It's not multiple times a day. It's not multiple times a week. The officers that are affected by this, when the adrenaline's taken away, whether or not you go to a desk job or you leave the police department, you go to Florida and you just sort of feel flat. You don't feel normal. Why? Because you're not experiencing for 15 years what was normal, which is regular adrenaline. You don't feel like yourself. Add this to the litany of things we've talked about that's adding up, right? So we did some survey results about the adrenaline addiction. 54% of the cops feel bored easily. 42% say they crave action and adrenaline. 37% of police officers have daily adrenaline dumps while on duty. 29% of officers say they actually crave adrenaline dumps on duty. Those are like the symptoms that I believe come from police work. Those are the ones that you develop, and they're slow, as I talked about, over time. And so now, what happens when all of a sudden you're not who you used to be because you're experiencing these things? Well, depression or suicidal thoughts can come in. This is the next symptom. Depression can be crippling. Despite the job of police officer itself being depressing in general, because all you're responding to is the negative, right? A second reason for police depression numbers, which are 3 times higher than the national average, is that a prevalence and progression of many of these symptoms that I've already described today, coupled with the lack of awareness that they're happening, the lack of understanding about why they're happening, or that it's even going on. You don't know you're hypervigilant. You just look back 10 years later and go, I'm a mess. You know what I mean? Like, I'm always on guard. Like, I don't trust anybody. Like, I used to have a lot of friends. What the hell happened, right? Like, All right, like you just look back all of a sudden, you go, oh, okay. That can lead to depression, suicidal thoughts. You don't know how to cope with it. You don't know what to do. You don't know what happened. How did I get here? Right? We talked to police officers about depression in our survey. 46% of the cops are more depressed since they became a cop. Did you hear what I just said? 38% say they currently have depression issues. Those numbers are staggering. 53% of police officers cannot talk about these issues with their family, they feel. So you have all these things happening, and now you're starting to be depressed on top of it, and over 50% of the cops say they cannot talk about this with their family. And 49% of them say, I can't talk about this with my coworkers. So how are you supposed to get better? How are you supposed to make a change? We have to talk about it. We have to start talking about it. Cops don't want to do that. Well, they're worried. If I tell people I'm depressed, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to be put on the desk. It's going to be retribution, right? I'm going to be fired. Can't say anything to anybody. We have to have this dialogue. Police departments are starting to do this where you can speak up about depression. 24% of the cops we surveyed say they don't know how to cope with what they've seen. 68% of officers say they've noticed negative changes in their personality since becoming a cop. My point here today for the cops is to make you aware of this so that you know about this, so that if this happens to you or a coworker, that you can use it. Or if it's happening to you, I mean, the biggest thing we can do is be aware of it, right? But also for the citizens to understand what the job of police is doing to our police officers so that there can be some empathy on both sides. Last but not least, when things get really bad and you're depressed on top of all the other stuff we talked about, some police turn to alcohol and substances. You know, if there's not sufficient treatment, management, prevention, awareness about cumulative trauma, or what I'm calling law enforcement distress syndromes, and these symptoms are at an unreasonable level, over time, people may turn to alcohol and drugs to cope with them. We hope not, but they may. Police suicide rates. 2020, 70 police officers have killed themselves already. 2019, 228 cops. 2018, 174 cops. 2017, 172. 2016, 143. This is all according to Blue Help. For several years, police suicides were close to, if not outnumbering, line of duty deaths. So there's a problem here. All right, if you're just joining us, you're listening to News Talk 850 WFTL. My name is Steve Warnicki. I'm a retired police sergeant. This is episode 4 of an ongoing series on policing in America. This episode is PTSD, cumulative trauma, what I'm calling law enforcement distress syndrome, and how the job of police officers is creating a divide. You can find the past episodes. You can find more from me. SteveWarnicki.com. That's SteveWarnicki.com. All right, I want to read some stuff that was sent to me over my time doing this. It's hard for me to read, actually, but this is just some of the stuff. This is one of the reasons why I keep doing this, because it's making a difference for even just some people. But listen to what people have written me. I'm not going to read their names, and I'll just read some excerpts from what they wrote. Somebody said, I have more than 41 years and counting of law enforcement under my belt. They went on to tell me their story, and they also said that they bought my book, and they read it, and they said, so I just started jotting down notes of memories to see where it takes me. Your story, your book, your LEDS work contributed to me beginning to document my life. Maybe this will be somewhat cathartic for me. Thank you for being a part of the process. That's cool, right? Somebody wrote to me and said, quote, I feel like I'm stuck in a maze and cannot find my way out to figure out who I'm supposed to be now. Somebody else wrote, you put into words exactly what I've been going through. I'm 50 now, and it's getting worse as I age. That's the thing. What's happening to me? How's this getting worse? I don't know what to do. Somebody wrote, I have exiled myself from most of my lifelong friends and even family members, outside wife and children. I have about a 30-minute limit to comfort, even in family gatherings, which will result in me having to leave or seclude myself if at home during any gathering. These are cops that have written to me, talking about what we just talked about, expressing, yeah, that's happening to me. Some of them worse than others, right? Somebody wrote to me, as well as not wanting to ever go out in public while off. When I'm home, and it's time to go to bed, I check the door several times. I always make sure my gun and myself are positioned properly to defend against a home invasion. Any unknown noise, and I'm up clearing the house. And if my 7-year-old son sleeps in at all, I go to his bedroom and check to make sure he's breathing. I've seen so much death and evil, my mind always goes to the worst possible outcome. That's just some of what people have written to me at stevewarnicki.com about this work. In an era of George Floyd, where you're standing 12 hours a day without a day off, where people are in your face, yelling, spitting, taking slingshots and slinging batteries at you, throwing things of urine and blood and chemicals, acid, shooting cops in the back of the head, throwing rocks, bottles, taunting them. What's that going to do to these symptoms, to the men and women who are making it possible for Americans to live the way we do? Because without the police, society would descend into anarchy and chaos within moments. I want to take just a minute for the people that are police listening, and I want to talk about working with law enforcement distress syndrome. All right, so first of all, I'm not a mental health professional. Get some help. At stevewarnicki.com, there are so many links, anonymous, inpatient, outpatient, whatever. Go there and get some help. That's important. I also want you to be mindful, as I talked about, of where you are on that spectrum. Take a mental inventory of where you are on those symptoms and how far along you are. But once you're aware of it, like the hurricane, you can start to recognize it because we've talked about it, we've named it, we've identified it. Oftentimes, awareness of these symptoms will help greatly. I've had so many of my close personal friends who are still cops that have called me and said, hey, I did that. I'm doing that hyper-vigilance thing you were talking about. Or I'm nervous to travel too now. And awareness is so powerful. Sometimes awareness begins a correction right there. Because you go, I'm doing that and I don't want to do that. I'm going to do something, whether that's diet, exercise, mental health. I mean, we always take care of our body, right? And go, let's go work out. That's important. Do that. You should eat right. You need to have good. Your brain has to have good things. I've been eating fast food now for like a week because I'm so swamped. That's not good. I'm not firing on all cylinders like normal. Eat well. Do those things. But don't forget to take care of your brain. Get some help. Talk about it. If you're not a police officer, can you appreciate what is happening to these men and women? Because it's dangerous for America. It is. It's threatening our very way of life. That's how important I believe this is and why I keep doing this. If you want to read the findings from the research study, educate yourself about it. Police, not police, family of police, just go read about it. It's free. You don't have to pay for it. Just go to stevewarnicki.com. Click on the LEDS tab. Knowledge is power. That's what I want you to take away from today. This isn't a message of let's feel sorry for the poor cops. They're just victimized. This is a message of empowerment. All right, so this is going to be the last episode of the Steve Warnicki Show on 850 WFTL for the time being. I just would like to thank some people so much. Sharina was our technical producer at 850 WFTL, and she's an amazing person. But most of all, of course, I'd like to thank Captain Kelly, who started this endeavor with me as the sidekick on the show and producing and getting our interviews and finding our consumer problems. And, she was just such a great support. So thank you so much for everything you've done. And, I couldn't have done the show without you. So I'm looking to the future, ladies and gentlemen. There's going to be more from me at stevewarnicki.com. And what's coming up, I'm going to be speaking at a police conference in Roanoke, Virginia, if COVID-19 doesn't ruin it, in September. And of course, you can find out media appearances, speeches, and more from me always at stevewarnicki.com. So please, the best thing you can do is just tell people about this information, because it's not to promote me, it's to fix what's going on, and we desperately need to get on the right path to doing that. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to everything getting much better. right? All right. You guys take care. We'll see you around the corner somewhere. God bless you.